Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
You're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. From Facebook is a segment we do where we pull off the messages you guys send us on our Facebook page. And now also you can send messages directly to WC Fab. WC Fab has been gracious enough to sponsor this segment. We really appreciate that.
They're keeping the roof over our heads.
If you want to help out the podcast, you can always reach out to our sponsors like WC Fab, Exergy, and Duramaxtuner. Of course, WC Fab is our number one resource for twin turbo kits, S300, S400 install kits, traction bars, all things fabricated and powder coated.
Pretty much.
Really is. Jacob Martinez sent in a message this week, maybe even today. Maybe he sent this like an hour ago.
Damn, we're on top of it.
Yeah. I am replying to you now, Jacob. All right, he says, hey guys, I listen to your podcast weekly. I'm a diesel tech at a cat dealer in California. I'm looking to buy my first diesel within the next month or so. My question, what do you think of the 6.7 Cummins? From what I have read, the engine is pretty decent, but the trans is pretty bad. What have you guys seen? I'm open to a Duramax and also a Power Stroke, but focused on the Cummins mostly. Sorry, I had to scroll there. From what I have, I'm sorry, hold on. Oh. I do know the 68 RFE is bad, but how bad? I only do moderate towing and just some daily driving. Okay, 6.7 Cummins, 68 RFE. This is our wheelhouse, Chris. Yeah. We're into this.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get into, well, to kind of touch on the third-gen 6.7s, there is some trans support out there through some different tuning softwares. There is a separate TCM on those transmissions, so you can have some help. Otherwise, if you get yourself into a 4-gen, pretty much all the custom tuning options out there can support transcals for that truck. Those transmissions, I mean, I think they get a really bad rap in the marketplace.
They do.
Are they as nice as some of the competitors? No, they're not. I mean, just reality, it is what it is. But at the same time, with some help of calibrations, I think that they're proving themselves to be somewhat reliable and somewhat,
68 RFE. Okay, you're more on the forums. Is the complaint more on reliability or drivability?
I think it's more the reliability aspect and it's a 50-50 mix.
Because for all the customers I've worked with on tuning, I can't remember one of them calling back to tell me that they smoked their 68 RFE.
I mean, definitely not.
I see is guys throw a high-pressure valve body plate if you're before 2014 or early 15, or you do a valve body from RevMax on the 15 to 18s. And then other than that, like you said, you throw good trans tunes on it. I haven't had guys have problems.
I think, and that's where I was kind of leading to this, is like the 68s, if you're looking for a nice daily driver, something to tow on the weekends, and you're looking to make, 400 to 500 horse, I think the 68s are a phenomenal trans. I think they're going to be reliable. They're going to do well. Nothing to worry about. Once you get past that type of power level, I feel like you're going to start to run into some issues. Yes, there are companies out there that offer some really badass transmissions, such as RevMax. But the flip side of that is are they as reliable as a built Ford Trans or a built Allison or a built 47 or 48? Well, I mean, the market's proven that it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the Ford, honestly, like you probably don't even have to build it unless you're over 700 or 800 horsepower.
Exactly. I mean, that's a badass trans.
That really, it's hard to beat. As much as I'm a Duramax fan and I love the Allison, it's hard to beat.
And like he had wrote in, he's a Caterpillar technician, so he's working on inline engines pretty much all day long. I see the value or why it's enticing to do a Cummins.
I wouldn't be scared off of a Cummins because of the 68. I personally wouldn't do an ASIN because I don't know when ASIN tuning is going to be out. Mm-hmm. They haven't been terribly problematic. They're not great with high horsepower unless you're really in tune with how to drive a trans that's about to break, and they're kind of expensive. So I personally wouldn't do the ASIN. I would do the 68. I wouldn't do a manual, mostly because I'm lazy, not because I think there's anything wrong with the current manual transmissions from Cummins. That's just my pure, utter laziness.
I would say, look for a 4-gen Dodge, and just call it a day. I think that's a really good choice of a truck.
And if you weren't going to do that, I don't think there's any problem going with any year LML. If you're going to do a 6.7 Power Stroke, either 12 to 14 and plan on a turbo swap, or just do a 15 and newer and get the badass turbo. 17, I think, is the best turbo.
Ball, no budget.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. Don't worry about putting fuel in it. Just have the truck. All right. I'm going to jump over here to Exergy's do's and don'ts. Exergy is actually what inspired us to kind of change up the format a little bit here and have some different segments. They gave us these really good just kind of advice for our listeners. And obviously being our high-pressure common rail fuel injection system supplier, so in other words, any injectors from Sportsman's to 250% over, 500% or whatever nonsense you need, they're the only people that we will go to for that stuff.
I love the do's and don'ts. I get really, I've learned something new at times too when I'm reading. We have the show notes and I'm like, okay.
Yeah. No
thought about
shit.
it. So, let's dive into it, Paul. What's the do this month or this week?
Oh, I like it. Flipping this up. Okay. Exergy's do for this week. Check your balance rates before replacing your injectors. This came up on the phone for me.
Okay.
I had a guy call in. Obviously, I'm not taking as many phone calls now, but I grabbed one. And guy called in and he's like, yeah, I'm in the middle of pulling my injectors. He had some questions about injector lines and cups and all of this for his LB7. And I asked him, I was like, well, how bad were the balance rates before you pulled them? He wanted to get honing. And he's like, well, I never checked the balance rates. He said, I had a haze at idle and I heard a lope, so I pulled the injectors. And I'm like, just my body cringe where I'm like, man, that's a big gamble. Like here we're very data driven. So when it comes down to diagnostics and like making sure, especially before a 16 to 26 hour LB7 injector job, I'm going to know I need new injectors.
Yep, absolutely.
With him, it's been a couple weeks now. The injectors came out. All of them but one were actually fine. So one of them was bad. He got full cleaning, did a real slight honing. I think he took it to 30%, got them all back in the truck, and then found out he actually had a regulator issue, which may have been the cause of what he was seeing all the way around, right? So like, yeah, it's definitely one of those, just be precise.
Absolutely.
They're precision parts. Be precise when you're diagnosing them.
Well, I'll take on the don't be fooled by Bosch reman. We get this a lot at the shop.
So common.
I just, I had LB7 injectors. I did them 2 years ago. How many miles are on the truck? 20,000 miles. Why are the injectors bad? Well, what kind of injectors did you put on them? Oh, Bosch remans. Well, that doesn't mean anything because the bodies are Bosch. They're Bosch injectors. Who remanned them? Where did they get rebuilt? Who did the testing? Who did the balancing? Who did the work? Well, O'Reilly's. I got them from Napa.
It's always fucking O'Reilly's.
And guys need to keep in mind that they're Bosch bodies. There's the Bosch reman. That's where it comes into play. They're a rebuilt, remanufactured injector.
Right.
Bosch body, that's where the Bosch reman comes in. You want to be very, very careful on where the injectors are coming from. If you're paying a couple $100s on an injector, chances are they're not going to last long.
And it's not just who did it, right? Because it's also what materials did they use. They put new nozzles on these. There's different metallurgy that holds up to different heat tolerances that plays a difference in how long it's going to last at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the combustion cylinder. Like, be smart, man.
No, when you talk about the reman injectors, more importantly, common rail with how high the pressure is, there's heat buildup, like you said. So making sure that it's a genuine Bosch nozzle, making sure that, the components that are going into the bodies, because, when injectors start to haze, the bodies are worn. So everything inside the body is going to be replaced. And again, genuine parts.
That's
quality parts. So
that's it. That's why we only go to Exergy for them.
Know where you're getting your stuff from.
Absolutely. We actually are going to be covering a new product release, but before we dive into that with Nick Priegnitz, I had just a couple of things. Number one, I was reading through the most recent issue of Diesel Power Magazine. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you go in and read it. They had some really awesome articles this month. We're getting really excited, Chris, because coming up June 3rd through the 7th, we're going to be out in Denver. I can't wait. I just want to tell you,
I've never been to Colorado. I'm excited.
UCC, we're doing May 4th, 5th. 4th, 5th, 6th, and then June 3rd through the 7th, we're going to be in Denver. We're hitting the two biggest diesel events of the year.
Back to back, literally within 30 days.
I'm also going on a week vacation in between.
Oh, wow. Look at you, man. Some guys just have all the luck.
I'm a world traveler. I don't know if you know that about me.
The little guys like me, I can't even skip work for a day.
No, you can't.
Dude, Nick has my balls in a vice when I do shit like that.
Get on the phone, fucker. Okay. Also, I just wanted to give you a couple of quick updates from the magazine. They had an 18 Equinox diesel that KJ, who's been on the show before, editor of Diesel Power Magazine, 1.6 liter Ecotech with a 6-speed manual transmission.
Dude, badass.
I went back and listened to the Nicola Menarini episode recently. I needed an excerpt on EGTs out of it. And I remember him telling us, over a year ago that when they released this 1.6 liter, they were going to put manual transes. At the time, the implication, at least the topic we were on, we all thought that just meant the cruise.
Yep.
I never in a million years thought they'd put a manual transmission into an Equinox. I actually think that's really fucking cool. Yeah. It was 30 plus miles to the gallon. I don't remember the exact notes, but you can read through KJ's article. It's like the first page of the edition.
How about $100,000 Super Duty?
Come the fuck out, guys.
Who the fuck, man?
And honestly, like now if you have it, I feel like all the other Super Duty guys should kind of hate on you a little bit.
Yeah.
Like just not like,
or you just know you're better than them.
Not enough to go scratch his truck. Like don't go scratch his truck.
Go fuck stuff
but just
up.
don't be cool with him either. Fuck him. No, it's really cool. I checked it out. I looked at the pictures. It was cool. They will never get my $100,000.
What $100,000?
Well, I mean, like over my lifetime that I'll make over the next 20 years, and I add up my total yearly income to 100. They won't get any of that money.
No, fuck no.
No. The Volkswagen debacle has cost an estimated $30 billion.
Thank you, Volkswagen.
You are a part of that.
I am, yeah.
You are a part of that.
They paid me.
Yeah. You fools. I heard a really good story about that one. That's actually why I put that note down. I think you told it to me about the guy who tried to take his buyback in with nothing.
Gutted the car. Yeah, that was like a big thing on social media, a lot of sharing and stuff.
Yeah.
He literally gutted everything out of the car. He drove the car into Volkswagen on a milk crate. No head unit, no interior, no nothing, no trunk lid, no doors, nothing.
It was already
and there was
such
nothing
a good
in the fine print. There was nothing in the fine print, and that's what this Jagoff did.
I just you're already getting such a good deal on that buyback. Everybody who got the buyback pretty much made money, right? Nobody got hosed.
No one got hosed. I mean, my car had 200,000 miles, and I made money.
Yeah,
thousands.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So, thank you, VW.
Yeah, $30 billion well spent. Yeah. Chevy bringing back the 4500 and 5500
Dude, that
again.
Hits you home.
Will be in the Silverado family.
That hits you home.
Some of you may know me from Duramax Forum as C4500 Paul.
This guy drove. Okay, so
because I'm a badass.
Short story long, as the guy over at the shop likes to say. You and Nick went and bought a box truck, a 4500 box truck. Okay, and then you bought it from him.
Yes.
And you cut the box out so it's just a wooden flatbed.
Yes.
Hillbilly hill rod is shit.
No, classy.
Couldn't diagnose the truck to save your fucking life.
Classy.
Right? Yeah, you did. It's cool. And you know what? It was a good daily. You had fun in that thing.
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
That
Actually,
was a perfect party barge.
Yeah, it was. I lived in an apartment at the time, an upstairs apartment. So we called it our rolling deck. Because we would go down and hang out and grill next to the truck and hang out on the back of the truck.
So Southside Chicago.
And it's so small town. Yep. It's unreal. Yep. We had a lot of fun in that truck. So I am excited to see the 4500, 5500.
The new
Silverados.
The new era.
They're not going to call them top kicks.
Nice.
Yeah. So classy.
Cool.
All right. And then before we dive into this interview with Mr. Priegnitz, we actually have Phil Grandinetti. Phil, how the hell are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Phil, you're the shop manager over at Duramaxtuner Calibrated Power.
Yes, I am.
You've been there for some time. You also did quite a bit of work on the Apache. I think that's when I first was introduced to you, as you were doing the wiring job in the original Apache project.
Yeah, a lot of the mounting of the body and the building of the chassis, the frame, and a lot of the preliminary stuff was done by me with Brett over at Precision.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then everything you guys touched, you now have had your techs that work for you go back and redo it correctly.
Exactly.
No, I say this because DJ, I think it was DJ was in here talking about doing the wiring, or maybe it was Justin. I caught him on one of the breaks talking about doing the wiring in the Apache. I'm like, I thought that's how I met Phil, was doing the wiring on the Apache.
No, actually, I didn't do any of the wiring.
Oh, you didn't do the wiring?
No.
Okay.
No, actually, Owen did most of it.
Oh, that
DJ
makes sense.
DJ did a bunch of it.
Sense.
That was his that was his hazing when he first started.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
That was his initiation.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, Phil, we had talked just a little bit about an interesting story we had from a customer's truck that came in recently. Can you kind of walk our listeners through it a little bit? Give me the outline.
Sure. I received a call about a week ago. Customer had one of our transmissions, a DT750, in his truck that we had installed. He drove the truck for almost a year. And he called me and said it was erratic shifting. It was shifting hard, shifting erratically, and it just happened all of a sudden. And so we asked them to bring it in. We brought it in. We diagnosed it. We really couldn't find anything wrong with it. There were no codes, nothing to lead us to believe there was anything wrong other than we did a relearn on it, did a tuning update, started driving it. Because we didn't find anything significantly wrong with it, we wanted to drive it and make sure there had to be something else going on. So we drove it. We drove it for almost a week. And I got in it, ran an errand, got out for 5 minutes, got back in and started up, and the shifting was terrible again, just as soon as I started the truck. So we brought it back to the shop. Same thing, no codes, nothing to lead us to anywhere as far as diagnostics were concerned. So we started looking into what are the possibilities, what could be wrong with it, what could cause this. And it came down to an improperly installed fast pump.
What?
What happened?
They had installed the ignition feed lead that energizes the relay for the pump in a port on the underhood fuse panel, and they had used a fuse tap, the style tap where the blade rides alongside or parallel to the blade on the fuse.
Yeah.
And that's a very unreliable way to do that, number one. And it was causing, and the other connections on the circuit were bad, and it was causing a loose connection type of scenario where it's kind of making and breaking, but you end up with either noise on the circuit, which is static, or a make and break type of thing where it's on and off.
Okay.
And an on and off is going to cause a voltage spike, which will reset the TCM.
Okay.
And it was resetting the adapts on the TCM, so the transmission would start shifting erratically or harshly.
No shit. So it was actually resetting the taps on the TCM, and then of course that's causing it to like not have any memory, so it's shifting like shit to get started. And then how long were the intervals where it would run well? Was it just random?
He went 20,000 miles the first time.
Oh, Jesus.
And I don't know when the fast system was installed. That was done since we had done the transmission.
Okay.
So at what point that was installed, I don't know.
Right.
But it just leads me to another point, is that our customers and our listeners should understand that underhood fuse panel isn't just a regular fuse panel. It's a control module. It's actually taking commands, turning circuits on and off on its own, independently from any other module in the truck.
Right.
On the LMLs especially. That's what we should state, that this is an LML.
Okay.
And so be very careful when you're installing aftermarket equipment on your truck that you can't just tap into any circuit in that fuse panel. It's just not a good idea. You got to be careful where you install it and use a proper fuse tap.
That's incredible. Who would have thought?
Yeah, right. Because I feel like that's one of those, like, I'm at home, I opened up my chest, and I'm like, okay, well, what's in here that I can use? I just got to tap this fuse real quick. Like, I would totally shortcut that and just grab what I had available instead of like make a special run for just I'd be like, it'll be fine. Yeah, I would. And it was. Sure. For a certain amount of time.
Yeah, whatever that interval was, we don't know.
Right.
You know, but it did start acting up and it did start having problems. And obviously it was happening more frequently because it happened to us after a couple of days of driving it.
So at least we were able to find it. And you guys did it in a good amount of time too.
Yeah, we found it, and I drove it for another 2-3 days afterwards, and it's fine.
That's awesome.
See, it reminds me of that Exergy story about like properly diagnose what you're doing before you jump in and just start doing it. Because tearing the trans out of the truck, even though the trans was the problem, wasn't going to fix anything. You could have dropped that trans, torn the whole thing apart, looked at it because of improper shifting, and it had nothing to do with what the actual issue is. You got to properly diagnose that truck first.
Correct. Yeah, we did. We looked at pressures. You know, we hooked up the pressure gauge to it. We double checked and triple checked that transmission to make sure that could not be the possibility, or that there was no possibility of that being the issue.
Right.
And then you narrow it down. You have to look at all the possible scenarios for that problem to happen, and you just have to narrow it down as possibilities, and then pursue something. And start looking in other areas. You got to think outside the box sometimes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I dig it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Phil.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Not a problem. We're going to kick you out of this seat, and we're actually going to grab Nick Priegnitz of Duramaxtuner right now. Nick, how the hell are you?
Doing great, man. Glad to be back. It's been a little while.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
You're only
But
like,
you guys have been slamming.
yeah, you're only like a block down the street too. You know, you can stop and say hi.
Dude, you're like you're a celebrity now. I gotta get invited to come down here.
That's true. I guess we should invite you down more often then, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, last time, I don't even remember what we talked about last time, if I could be honest. You've been on the show so many times.
Wasn't it the conversion month?
Conversion
Maybe
month,
it was.
man. Those
How
are
all the way
popular
back in
episodes.
August.
That was.
Give me a little credit here, Paul.
That was kind of a big one.
Time flies when you're having fun, Paul.
Yeah, 58 Apache, Duraburb, Scottsdale. We talked about all of that.
We did.
We have talked about UCC before. We've talked about LML towing before.
Power, the power recipes.
Power
He's done a couple of
recipes,
those.
yep.
Or the goal, the budget builds.
No
The budget
Man's
builds.
Land.
Yep, No Man's Land.
That was a good
fun.
one. Yeah. Yeah, you've been on a lot. I dig it. It's always one of those where when we come up for something new or when we need somebody really detail-oriented or really technical, we kind of go and get Nick.
Sure.
Obviously, all the Gale Banks ones and all that, a lot of fun too. So today we were kind of talking about what to cover tonight, and the discussion of what's going on at Duramaxtuner came up with the new line of turbos that are coming out. Now, we have not announced these turbos officially. I think you referenced them in one of the videos of a couple months ago.
Yeah, we've been teasing them out a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll call this the official release of the Stealth 67 G2.
The official leak.
Via the podcast.
The official leak.
The official
That's it.
leak.
Yeah, that's what
it.
it is. Yeah,
That's
it's like
it.
a mixtape.
Well, we're all just scumbag paparazzi anyways. But what that means is we really want to just get our listeners some really good technical information about these turbos. Obviously, we've been talking about a lot at the office.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be a good time to kind of walk us through maybe why get into a new line of turbos. The Stealth 64 has been doing really well.
The Stealth 64 has been a really popular product for us. Really strong growth over the past 2 years. The product itself has matured and has, we continue to add improvements to the product, even not vocally, even just in our operation and processing. But we've learned a lot about turbocharging over the past 2 years, and we've really sunk a lot of that knowledge back into the product. And I think, this year, in order to set a challenge for ourselves to set that new benchmark, we had to come out with that new product. We had to go with the G2, the 67 G2. And I'm excited for it, man.
I like it. Okay, so just that kind of drive of like, what's next? Like, we did this really well. We feel like we're really solid here. But the motivation behind this is just kind of what else is out there, right? Yeah.
The 67, I should start with the 64. So the 64 started with the Stealth 64 on the LB7 side, and then matured into the VVT side, and then it's a product where we're going on the compressor, we're going on the turbine, we're massaging the turbine, we're making edits there, and all the while we're kind of cataloging the differences in the turbochargers, putting our best case scenario forward for like a year from now. What do we want this thing to turn into? And the LB7 64 G2 was a product that took advantage of some of those benefits, right? So we saw the 64 G2 on the i-high side and the LB7 side pick up a bigger turbine. So we had a custom-made turbine for that turbocharger. The machining, the wastegate play, all these little things that we picked up over the course of those past 2 years on the Stealth 64, on the LB7, we've rolled that into like, what do we want to see as the next best thing? And that 64 G2 is an ass-kicking turbocharger. Mm-hmm. Like, it is one of my favorite turbos to drive. And I'm excited for that. I'm still excited over that one. Okay, that thing hasn't even grown legs yet. Like, once we get more of those in the marketplace, you're going to see some people really start to a devout fellowship to that turbocharger. Like, as far as a turbo that's well matched to a stock long block truck, nice.
Right there.
So my goal on the 67 side is to sacrifice as little drivability as possible. The 64 G2 drives so nice. To take that drivability and to give the customer that 750 plus horsepower range where the G2 64 is limited at 640. So it's a big challenge. Another 100 horsepower plus, right?
Right.
So we had to go to a bigger turbine yet. Bigger turbine. I mean, the i-high housing only has so much room, and the bearing pack only has so much. So we're kind of like, there's a lot of constraints we're up against. It's that wall where you feel like you have three arms and they're each on one wall, right? That room where like, hey, I better open a door pretty soon in here. It's getting kind of full. That's really what the LB7 turbocharger feels like for us now. And Chris, you've been for riding the Apache.
Yeah, we went out the other day. Yeah.
So you know what the drivability is like on the 67 G2. Really strong response. Top end pull is there. It's got a badass sound.
Sound, especially in the Apache. It's definitely rowdy. I mean, coming from when I had my LB7 a few years back, it had the Stealth G1. You know, the first generation. Drove really nice, made 600 horse. Me and Paul have driven the Scottsdale with the G2 at 640 horse. And drives really nice. I mean, you can't take anything away from the characteristics of that turbo. What was crazy to me is when we went out for a drive and, you know, you have the edge monitor, you have all these things and you're, you know, blimping the throttle, and the Charger's just coming to life. And you think about how big the exhaust wheel and the compressor is, and you compare that to an S400 or a big S300 Charger, which, Paul, I mean, Nick, we've all experienced in the past, and there isn't anything like it. Like, I've never seen something or felt something that comes in the boost as hard as it does and just carries through the whole RPM window.
Yeah.
Very drivable, very responsive, really good street manners.
You know, and I think it's funny how we look at this compared to maybe how I step back and I think about, like, looking at this turbocharger development over the last few years. It was 5 years ago now that we first did the Cummins turbo shootout. And we asked guys to recommend us this turbo that we knew didn't really exist, right? Like, the parameters we set out were what everybody wanted, but that wasn't real. Nobody had one Charger that could do it. And a lot of that mentality, a lot of that learning experience, I feel like went into developing a hole in the market for the Stealth 64. Like, that's originally what that LB7 was about. Everybody wanted a stock long block turbo. It wasn't there. There wasn't something that had that drivability. And then, obviously, as that's been out, and like you said, we've kind of really dialed in that process and that turbo and all the little features and things like that go into it, you start looking at, like, what are people in the market asking for now? And for me, a big one is the sled pull guys. They need more power. They still got to be stock appearing. Rules all over the country are changing as far as they want just stock turbo classes up in the Northwest. Like, literally no modifications to your turbochargers. And then there's a stock appearing class, but that pushed a lot of turbos into that class, and those guys are really crying for more power. But what everybody also wants is that thing that I think turbochargers most often forget, and that's drivability. So it's always interesting to hear you guys talk about turbos and what we developed and what's super important to us compared to what I hear people promote turbos for and really get behind turbos on is they always want to know about peak numbers.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of peak numbers, I think that's a perfect segue into your run on the Apache. 800?
We just barely scratched 800, and that's really pushing that thing to the moon. I mean, that's you're the marketing guy. Right? I hesitate to go out there and say, yeah, it's an 800 horse turbo. Like, yeah, it is. It will make the number. Is it necessarily designed for that? It can be pushed there.
Right.
Okay. If you're in the sled pull game, you know what it's about. The thing runs 1,700 degrees. You get everything you can out of it. That's the name of the game.
That's the bleeding edge, right? Like that's where we need to know that it can go to, because we've seen that 64 on the bleeding edge, and it's just not the same result.
Right.
You know, that extra 100 horsepower. That's not 4 feet on the track. That's not 4 inches on the track. That's a lot of track.
Yeah, that's a significant number. I'm glad that you touched on the turbo shootout and you touched on some of those other things. I mean, that peak number is one thing, right? That's the sexy part of turbocharging. The S300, S400, like, you look at those turbos on a website and you're like, oh, fuck, man, I got to get one of those. They're so nasty. But the stock frames, the drivability is just, we heard when we called around on the turbo shootout, we heard the sales pitch, right? It's all the same shit. It spools up just like stock. It makes 1 million horsepower. The sound is great. It installs simply, and then you get it, and it's like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Tow's great.
Here's the data.
Tow's better than stock.
Right. Tow's better than stock. Like, it just doesn't happen, right? So there is no perfect turbocharger. We learned that a long time ago. That's no surprise. But there is clearly a want and a need in the marketplace for a turbo that installs easily, a turbo that makes really good power on the top end, which this turbo does. A turbo that drives great, right? That's 90% of your use of the turbocharger is get in it and drive it, and I want to enjoy the driving experience.
I think one of the things too, talking to a lot of guys on the phone and, just like the turbo shootout, they compare all these different turbos, like, 63 this, 64 that. And you have to tell these guys, like, that's just a compressor measurement. That doesn't mean a whole lot.
No.
When we talk about drivability and we talk about peak numbers and we talk about everything as a whole, it's really on the exhaust side. It's the matching of the exhaust housing and the wheel.
Yeah. The exhaust is the hardest to work on. Mm-hmm. And you get the least credit for it in the marketplace, right? Like some people are going to look at the Stealth 67 LB7 and say, "Oh, it's just a 67. I can get a 68 or 71." Like, motherfucker, that's bullshit. First of all right. Look at the exhaust side. The exhaust side is where it's all about. You can put the biggest compressor you want on something, but when you get that drive pressure up at 70 pounds and you're making 40 pounds of boost, the turbo is not going to make anywhere near the power that our Stealth 67 does being balanced.
And it's hot.
And it's really hot.
The engine's working its ass
terrible
off,
to drive. The anti-surge probably isn't designed well. So you got a truck that probably spools up relatively quick, then goes into surge, and then doesn't make the peak power that it's advertised.
But it sounds cool when it surges.
Yeah. You just need a bigger trans tune.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. How high to stall the converter? I actually saw that one today. I felt a little bad, but
it's a Band-Aid.
But it is, and I think that's the point, right? Is a lot of guys, it's kind of always crazy to me what they're willing to sacrifice to get a number or to be competitive or just to have that turbo that they hear about that's really popular, right?
Yeah.
Like S300s and things. Everybody's heard about a 66 on a Duramax, right? That's like the staple.
Sure.
4094s, things like that have like, as we get into the VVT market, have all sorts of even different implications because a lot of guys do like the idea of turbine braking. A lot of guys do like the idea of quick spooling, right? And that's what vanes are all about.
Yeah.
How did that kind of play into this 67 G2 line?
So that's a good question. The path down the 67 G2 in the variable vane market was a little bit longer, I would say, or more work anyway. And that's because on a VVT turbocharger, there's more moving pieces. So, there's a turbine out there that's commonly used, 10-blade turbine, the power stroke turbine. We know what to expect out of that turbine, and it fits relatively easily, and it's a part you can use. To go over and above that is the 4094 turbine, 4094 VA, which is a strong turbine. In the 4094 VA turbocharger, with that full Garrett design, I feel like it does a piss poor job. And I'm not going to blame the turbine. I think the turbocharger itself is designed poorly. It's not designed around drivability. It's designed to be a performance turbocharger by Garrett engineers who probably didn't drive the truck enough to know.
Well, they seem to segment it really hard. Mm-hmm. It's a performance turbocharger or it's a stock turbocharger.
Yeah. There's nothing in between.
Oh, I definitely just buy this turbocharger and park this truck. Don't worry.
It looks great. I mean, it markets well. It's a strong marketing turbocharger. It's inexpensive. It's all new. It has big numbers on the wheels. It has a reasonably decent size horsepower output potential.
Sure.
But if you drive one, they're terrible.
Yeah.
They really don't drive well.
It's the spool up and it's the turbine braking. That overall control of what the whole reason that you stuck with a variable vane. Because you pulled out a stock turbo, you have a million options to go fix vane.
Right.
You can put anything you want in there.
Yep.
But yeah, it is. I've heard the disappointment on the phone from guys of like, I got a 4094. It's like that whisper.
It's too cheap to do the right thing. Yeah. Like, I understand why you did it, man. I get it. It's just you're in that spot now. Some other sucker out there would buy one.
Yeah.
You could sell it.
Somebody's always looking for a used 4094.
There's always used ones online, though, too. You go on, different Facebook groups or Craigslist, whatever. There's always a used 4094 for sale.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's a transition charger, right? It's like, I know I want more, but I don't know what's a great option because there's not a lot of great options. If we look around it, drivable, big horsepower VVTs, it's a pretty small category of turbos we're looking across.
Right. And we looked at that turbocharger and we thought, like, man, where did they go wrong?
Yeah.
Like, what did they miss here? And so we looked through that turbocharger and we saw a few things here and there, and it was like, man, what can we salvage? What can't we? Can we really start with this part in a business model? No. We can't start with a new 4094 because by the time we go through it and machine everything to do it right, we price ourselves out of the market.
Yeah.
So we had to go back and look at our cores and say, what can we do here to go over and above the 4094? So that meant redesigning the whole turbine side, and that turbine side redesign was built around drivability. So good vane control. So having the vanes set up so that we have really good turbine braking, the ability to close the vanes all the way if we want to, and the ability to fit a larger turbine than the 4094, because I can't come to market with a new turbocharger and not have it make more power than the 4094 turbine, right? So we went with a turbine that's larger than the 4094 turbine, which meant making a custom turbine. So to do that, then we have to change the dowel spacing. We have to machine the exhaust housing. So, I mean, for instance, on the 4094, the vanes are 13.5 millimeters tall. We went to a vane that's just over 15 millimeters tall. So our turbine accepts a flow direction, a flow path just over 15 millimeters tall, 16 millimeters. So there's more turbine there, not just by overall diameter, but by width on the inducer.
So like overall surface area is much larger.
Yeah,
it's not just a little bit of stretch.
Yeah, the ability of the turbine to do work is greatly improved.
Gotcha.
And then the unison ring, again, custom designed for our application to give us the control that we wanted. So the ability to go just to bring the vane tips right to the edge of the turbine wheel and to bring the vanes closed to maintain that turbine braking that all of our customers were saying, all our dealers especially, like, I'm not going to sell 4094s, I'm not going to sell anything that can't get turbine braking. That is a selling point of a VVT turbo.
It's really, I mean, like I said before, it's the reason you want a VVT.
Over
right?
fixed vanes.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't know how many times I've said the word custom in this conversation, right? But all these custom pieces cost time, they cost money. You got to make big commitments in quantity. So all those things added up. The easiest thing was the compressor wheel. It was a 67.7. We went to a quality supplier. We got a strong compressor wheel. The thing performs. It's proven. What we spent our time on is the turbine side. It's making sure that you have the ability to lower the drive pressure when you need to, and you have the ability to raise drive pressure and run high velocity when you need to.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to me as we talk about like the time and what goes into building these, right? Is I kind of think back through that story of like the 64's done, it's on the market, we're running well, and then it's like, okay, Nick has this idea, I'm going to do a bigger turbo. And like all the guys on the sales floor were like, yeah, sure you are. Okay,
Or
cool.
how about when he was like, oh, look at the new vanes. Look at the new vanes when he had them. And I'm like, who gives a shit?
Right.
Like I don't
this
care.
Is not cool. But as we start to see it come together and as we start to talk to the guys in the shop who like we had on DJ and we had on Mike about doing some R&D stuff and pulling turbos off, putting turbos on. There's a long process that goes into the R&D on these.
There is a big investment in time and energy on those guys' part.
If you had to say, like, I had that first idea and we went out and we, like, made that first step going forward on it until now where we're actually releasing it, what does that time frame look like? Is that a few months?
It's a year. Yeah, I would say it's a year from inception of, like, when I sit down or you hear me spouting off in the office about, like, wouldn't it be cool if, right? Usually the next day I'm buying parts I shouldn't.
Right.
And then they come in and it's like, oh, God, what did I get myself into? Now I got to buy these other parts to make those work. And then, by the end of it, I mean, we're a year before we have 5 or 10 test units on the shelf that we know are going to work. We got that one on DJ's truck running good.
It is.
We got other test units. It's just like...
Well, test units is always a funny term to me, too, because I think when guys think about buying this, there's no real idea of what goes into R&D. You can't make one turbo and be like, cool, it hit the dyno number, ship, right? I mean,
mass produce.
When's the last time you developed a turbo or any product for that matter, and you went out with the first prototype and were like, perfect, it's ready, send it to market? Like,
oh, God, I wish. That's the shitty part about the Duramax is the turbo it's 5 hours. Like if everything's anti-seized and great, right?
Right. Yep.
It's 5 hours.
And it just got installed and taken back off.
Yeah. And that happens the guys in the shop, that happens 5 times per turbocharger at least, just testing whatever, checking it out after it's been run hard in the dyno, making sure the turbine's holding up, making sure the bearings look good, making sure that, we didn't mess anything up in our SOP. Just making sure stuff is good. And the testing, for instance, right? You talk about the dyno. We take the turbocharger to the dyno, we make the number. great, right? Even if it makes 900 horsepower, you think I can go to market and say, best turbo on the market, 900 horsepower, fucking beaut, man. No, it has to drive, right? That's our whole thing at Duramaxtuners. We build parts that you put on your truck because not only do they make power, they drive well. So what does that mean? Turbo speed sensor, drive pressure, boost pressure, running in at different loads, running in different scenarios, dialing in vane maps, so we can coach not only our tuners in-house, but tuners outside. So let's say you have tunes from Corey, or let's say you have tunes from somebody else out there, right? We want to be able to tell them, here's a script, or here's what you need to do to make this turbocharger run right, and this is what we can expect from it.
I think that's what's really cool is that total look at it's not a turbocharger, right? It's somebody's driving experience.
Yeah.
Somebody's making an investment into their truck. They're pulling funds out of their job or their life to say, I want to make my truck feel different. I want a different experience behind the driver's seat. And so many times we've talked to guys and we've tuned trucks and we've seen them on the dynos where they're just disappointed. And it's always a crushing thing to be like, it's a lot of work. Like you said, it's 5 hours for somebody who knows what they're doing and has all of the right tools and a topside creeper in a shop with a controlled environment and no nagging wife and no running screaming kids. And
3 other people that know what the hell they're doing just in case. We can keep going.
Right. So it's always kind of exciting for me for guys to really be getting these turbos, and we're just starting to see the first kind of batches of them go out. Like you had mentioned, DJ from the shop driving on it. It's everybody who gets out of his truck now is like, oh fuck yeah! Like they all have that stupid grin and nod to each other.
It's a strong running truck. I mean, considering what it is, considering the setups that he's had in the past, definitely a strong running truck.
Absolutely.
So
and that's what we want for our customers. We want something that installs easy, so when they're done, it doesn't have boost leaks. Right, so that we can reliably say, you install this turbocharger, this is going to be your driving experience moving forward.
Yeah, and that does come back to that drop-in application. As you had mentioned, as we get into larger frames and we start to look at what are the other turbo options out there, there's a lot of routes you can go.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of drawbacks that pushed us back down this path.
I've run every fucking S400 there is, man. I know how cool it is. Trust me. I put an S480 on my truck with stock fuel in 2007. I mean, I get it, right? It looks really impressive when you pop the hood, but odds are if this is your first turbo install and this is your first time going through this, that's not going to be your last if you buy that turbo.
Well, that's awesome. Any other information that you wanted to let our listeners know?
Unofficial launch, right? So if you heard this and you're like, I got to buy one, I got to have it now, there is a limited selection on the shelf. Please be patient with the sales guys. These are sought-after units. There's definitely spoken for stock out there.
Yeah, not in inventory, and I know of 2 that have sold already.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing our best to build a stock up, but we're already playing catch up on the Stealth 64 stuff. The name of the game is avoiding stock out. So we're doing our best to keep up on those, and just be patient, be understanding, and understand we're trying to get you the best product experience out there.
That's awesome. Listeners, if you are looking to follow up with Duramaxtuner about that, of course, you can reach them at 815-568-7920.
Or my extension, 2121.
Nice. Well played, Chris.
Yeah, you know what? Take advantage of this situation when I can.
Emke has driven both Stealth 67s and all the Stealth 64s, so he can give you and you've driven a whole host of other turbochargers, so really
big selection.
Odds
I lose track.
Just for guys out there shopping turbochargers, please, for the love of God, talk to someone who's driven the turbocharger you're planning on buying. In the truck that you're planning on buying with the same setup, hopefully, you really want to know what you're getting into. This is one of the biggest pieces that affects drivability on the truck. It is the camshaft of your small block Chevy.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact.
It's a big choice.
Great reference. I love it. Listeners, thank you so much. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
I'm Nick Priegnitz.
Thanks for listening.
The Diesel Performance Podcast is brought to you by Calibrated Power Solutions, home of Duramaxtuner.com. Calibrated Power develops emissions-equipped calibrations for a wide variety of diesel powertrains, including the Duramax, Cummins, Powerstroke, John Deere, Case, New Holland, and many more. For more information and great customer service, check out calibratedpower.com or call 815-568-7920. That's 815-568-7920. If you'd like to contact the podcast, send us a message through Facebook or email Paul at Duramaxtuner.com or Chris at CEHMKE@Duramaxtuner.com. Paul and Chris may be contacted by phone. Chris's extension is 2121 and Paul's is 2122. Hey, thanks for listening. Your feedback is appreciated. Please rate and review us on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and by all means, let us know if you have any ideas for a podcast. We'd welcome any suggestions.
Short story long, as the guy over at the shop likes to say, you and Nick went and bought a box truck, a 4,500 box truck. Okay, and then you bought it from him.
Yes.
And you cut the box out so it's just a wooden flatbed. Like,
yes.
Hillbilly hill rod is shit.
No, classy.
Couldn't diagnose the truck to save your fucking life.
Classy.
Right? Nah, yeah, you did. It's cool.